Rise and fall of Ethiopia's TPLF, from rebels to rulers and back. The TPLF was formed in 1975 at a time when hundreds of millions of people across Africa and the Middle East were demanding revolutions and liberation. Among those in Ethiopia calling for bows were a dozen young men from the mountainous northern region of Tigray, inspired by Marxist-Leninism, a profound sense of national identity, and the Ethiopian slogans of the time. They imagined a brave new world for their country. Only a year earlier, Haile Selassie, the last emperor of Ethiopia, had been deposed and murdered by hardline Marxist army officers who immediately set about imposing a harsh authoritarian rule. In Tigray, there had long been resentment at the power of the centralized Ethiopian state. Many remembered the Tigrayan armed revolt of 1943, which had been brutally put down. This time, the TPLF leaders vowed they would triumph. Through the late 1970s, the TPLF grew steadily. By 1978, the party had around 2,000 fighters, according to CIA estimates at the time. 2 years later, it could mobilize twice as many, the agency said. Among them was Debretsion Gebremichael, who was then a wireless operator and propagandist for the insurgents and is now the group's leader. The TPLF's success owed nothing to chance. Its leaders were ruthless and canny. They fought and destroyed rival rebel groups in Tigray and were carefully to downplay their own Marxist views, which would be unpopular with the conservative, devoutly Christian rural populations that made up the TPLF's initial support base. Instead, they emphasized the threat posed to the local traditions and regional autonomy by the socialist policies of the regime in Addis Ababa. An alliance with like-minded leftist nationalist rebels from Eritrea People's Liberation Front in the neighboring province brought the organization critical training and experience, which allowed it to resist the massive firepower of the Soviet-backed government regime. Ethiopian large-scale military operations to crush the insurgency have failed with heavy losses of men and equipment, noted the CIA in 1983 assessment. The government has paid a high political and economic price. But the suffering in Tigray was immense, with blunt and brutal counter-insurgency campaigns playing a significant role in the appalling famine of 1984. The TV reports that prompted global concern and the Live Aid concerts were filmed in Mekelle. By the end of the 1980s, the TPLF was by far the biggest and most effective among the coalition of Ethiopian armed rebel groups that had united under the banner of the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, EPRDF, to fight the ailing Ethiopian regime. On 28 May 1991, TPLF troops backed by Eritrean forces seized control of Addis Ababa, the capital. The fall of the regime left the TPLF's leader, 36-year-old Meles Zenawi, in power and the army and intelligence services dominated by Tigrayans who moved swiftly to consolidate their control in other sectors. Jobs were found for former comrades. Debretsion, the one-time wireless operator and by now a veteran close to Zenawi, was made the deputy head of the National Intelligence Agency and later the Ministry of Communications and Information Technology. Debretsion's career spanned the two sides of Ethiopia under the TPLF-dominated coalition government from 1991. There was the construction of a carefully balanced ethnicity-based federal state, rapid development progress, massive infrastructure investment, and stunning economic success which has come close to banishing the hunger that once made the country infamous. Mekelle thrived, its neat streets and electricity lines testament to the resources channeled to the TPLF stronghold. But there was also repression so remorseless that it worried even the US, which saw Ethiopia as the cornerstone of its security strategy in the region and was prepared to tolerate most of the excess of the TPLF leadership. Meles died suddenly in 2012, and his hand-picked successor Hailemariam Desalegn proved too weak to manage growing tensions. Discontent, especially among the two largest ethnic groups, the Oromo and Amhara, threatened the delicate compromise of the 1994 constitution, and representatives of the two communities eventually joined forces to outmaneuver the TPLF within the ruling coalition to get Abiy, who is of mixed Oromo-Amhara parentage, appointed as Prime Minister in 2018. Abiy moved swiftly. Top TPLF officials were sacked from key security posts, generals were arrested on graft charges, and changes were introduced to counter the Tigrayan dominance of the armed forces. Political prisoners were freed from secret prisons, exiled dissidents were welcomed home. Cumbersome state enterprises were privatized, and restrictions on the media were eased. Abiy's peace deal with Eritrea, which won him the Nobel Peace Prize, isolated the TPLF. By this summer, simmering tensions had risen further. The TPLF refused to hand over wanted fugitives or join a new political party set up by Abiy to replace the old ruling coalition, and it went ahead with local elections in Tigray despite polls being postponed nationwide owing to the coronavirus pandemic. Observers said the decision was a provocation, even if supporters claimed it was a necessary defense of federal rights. Abiy's office say the Prime Minister has tried to work with the TPLF but has rebuffed. The spark that set light to the tinder came in early November with an alleged raid by TPLF units on federal military bases in Tigray, in which many National Army officers were killed and substantial quantities of hardware were seized. Abiy launched his offensive immediately. It has taken federal troops 3 weeks to fight their way to within artillery range of Mekelle. It's unclear whether Debretsion and TPLF's other leaders are now in the city. Analysts think it likely they have scattered, seeking remote hideouts from which they can run a lengthy and costly insurgency. They are looking at the long term and trying to make Tigray a burial ground for Abiy's troops. Waldemariam said, "It's very tragic, a lot of people will suffer." So this is written 8 months ago by The Guardian. Even if most of the article looks balanced, but the way The Guardian presents TPLF as formulating a very balanced ethnic federal system in Ethiopia is not correct at all, because for the first thing, that Ethiopia should not have ethnic federalism, as we do not have ethnic federalism in Western countries, including America. We don't have a white state, a black state, a Hispanic state, or something, or a party based on ethnic color or ethnicity. The same thing should be, politics should be based on ideas. And Ethiopia is having politics being carried out based on ethnicity or based on the language people are speaking. So they are affiliated. This article is affiliated to the TPLF, and of course TPLF is got a success partly because of the weakening of the Derg regime, which was in power for 17 years from 1974 up to 1991 in Ethiopia, and also because of the fall of the USSR. There are a lot of things that contributed, and also the undemocratic nature of the Derg itself also has contributed for the fall of the Derg. It's not about the gallant and bravery of TPLF fighters. Now they are doing every kind of crimes and atrocities on innocent people across Ethiopia, and United States and other organizations and their medias do not give attention to the people, the innocent people in Ethiopia who are suffering because of the activities of these TPLF, the so-called TPLF fighters. I cannot call them TPLF fighters. They are terrorists, which are backed by United States, by moral and also by ideas they are supported. Thank you.